Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion on polyester alternatives and the innovation landscape. So in this session, we will have a look at alternatives to virgin fossil fuel-based polyesters. We will focus on biosynthetics, and we'll look at a few challenges and opportunities in this space, as well as how innovators and brands can work best together to scale and implement these solutions. My name is Charlotte Borst. I'm looking after raw material innovations at Fashion for Good. And before we dive into the topic, I would also love our panelists to quickly introduce themselves and their role, as well as any specific focus area. Starting with you, Camilla.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Camilla. I work for a company called Bestseller. Bestseller represents more than 20 brands. I hope you know Jack and Jones, Only, Veramoda, Name It and Select It. Those are a few of them.
I'm Dr. Amanda Parks, and I'm the Chief Innovation Officer and founding scientist of Pangaya, which is a material science company that manifests as a fashion brand in the world, but we also do back-end R&D. And my background is hybrid material science, computer science.
Hi everyone, I'm Christine. I'm a product innovation manager at PVH Europe, and for those that don't know what PVH Europe is, it's the parent company of Tommy Hilfiger and Calvin Klein's, two of our main brands.
Hi, I'm Shuler, Head of Innovation for Alpine Group, Paradise Textiles, and we're a vertical manufacturing partner to many sportswear, outdoor fashion brands.
Thank you all, really great to have you. So if we're looking at the wider biosynthetic innovation landscape, what would you say are some of the biggest drivers and opportunities in this space? And also feel free to mention any collaborations that you've been engaged with. Again, starting with you, Camilla.
Yeah. We use a lot of polyester in Bestseller. Like many other fashion brands, it's our second most used material, polyester. Our most used is cotton, so no surprise there. But polyester have a wide range of problems linked to fossil fuel. So of course we're looking into how to make textile recycling for polyester. But even when we do that, we see still we have problems with it. So we are looking at alternatives for polyester. And here, bio-based polyester is interesting, comes with a set of problems, but we see great potential also. So we are very curious to see what this can bring, and we hope for a more diverse portfolio for polyester fabrics going forward. We are, of course, involved with a lot of projects in Fashion for Good. One is renewable carbon, where we look at PHAs. We have a collaboration with Kintra, which produces PBS. And then, of course, we work with Ecovative, who are here today. So those are the areas that we are curious on. We are also looking at PEF. So those are the most interesting bio-based polyesters right now for us.
Thank you, Camilla. And Amanda?
Yeah, so at Pangaya, we're committed to having our supply chain be fossil fuel free as much as possible. So one of the first things that we're doing is looking at where do we actually need the functionality of things like synthetics? And I think that a lot of products inside of fashion right now are over-designed. For just standard lifestyle products, we can do them with materials that aren't as damaging. So that's the first place. Go to biodiversity, look at all of the interesting new developments in lyocells and viscoses that can kind of mimic some of those synthetic properties if you're looking for that. But of course, there are areas where we have not figured out we still need the synthetics for things like activewear, and so we're moving towards basically, as much as we can, having 100% bio-based solutions and biodegradable solutions. We know that those don't always go hand in hand. We were the earliest and lead investor in Kintra, and have been developing product with them for multiple years now. So that is one of those solutions. And we're also closing a deal around looking at how we can use biodegradable graphene that's coming from some lab research to mimic spandex and elastane. So kind of there's multiple different areas that are, of course, I think in this room we're much more used to the bio-based solutions, which are of course coming along the way, but I also just am pointing out that there's alternative spaces. Another one being something like multiplex laser surface enhancement, which works as like superheated plasma gas to do things like reduce microfiber shedding when you are using synthetics and recycled. So that's a bit of a ramble, but lots of different angles on what we're doing in that space.
Thank you, Amanda and Christine.
Yeah, I think to echo some of the comments that Camilla and Amanda made, I think at PVH we're looking for a portfolio of solutions, and again cotton is our largest fibre use, and polyester being our second, and we're kind of looking at what is the needs of the end product and understanding how actually we could potentially optimize the consumer experience, the consumer product value, in a different way, looking at biosynthetics, like how could we deliver different properties from these biosynthetics and utilize them to deliver a different performance. So we're looking into a number of different polymers and for different reasons, and I think some of them link with like microfiber shedding and the things that we see, but also we have quite strong targets as a business overall, so there's different elements that come into play, which is driving us towards this. I think we also are part of the Renewable Carbon Project for looking at PHAs. We've looked into PBS, and then we are also considering, obviously, the drop-in solutions as well. So we're kind of trying to work in a kind of holistic manner, looking at many different opportunities. But yeah, of course, one of the major drivers is our impact reduction overall.
Thank you, Christine. And lastly, Lewis?
Yeah, I think most of the points have been hit, between PLA, PBS, PEF, PHA, Bio-PET. So they all kind of have their pros and cons, and what's the advantage or disadvantage. I think maybe touching back on what Amanda mentioned, a big part of our focus is not only looking at what's happening with biosynthetics, but beyond biosynthetics, and how you could take something like a man-made cellulosic filament and be able to kind of replicate some of the properties that you'd see in some polyester or nylon. And so I think also, aside from biosynthetics, that's kind of an area too where you can look at alternatives that are not polyester-based.
Definitely an interesting area to explore as well, for sure. You have mentioned a few already, but what would you say are kind of the key challenges and barriers that you observe to implement these new materials, and how do you think could these be tackled? Maybe starting with Lewis this time.
Yeah, I would say, probably the thing that comes to mind right away is the thermal stability of, talking about PLA or PBS, and something that's prevented them is low glass transition. So you think about it, you make the fiber and it's nice, and you have a nice fiber, but you've not really considered what happens in the manufacturing process after extrusion. And I think that's been a big challenge looking at biosynthetics, whereas Bio-PET may, or would certainly help avoid that issue. But then there's issues with that as far as scaling and commercialization, and what are you measuring? Are you measuring carbon footprint? Are you measuring biodegradation, how it inhibits recyclability, things like that?
And how would you say, do these challenges differ if you look at man-made cellulosic innovations for polyesters and biosynthetics? What are differences there?
I would say it's a bit easier with man-made cellulosics. The thermal stability challenge goes away, but then you kind of open up a whole new set of challenges of do you want it to be tree-free, and how are you bringing in pulp, and how's that pulp consistent from the front end with a consistent output?
Yeah, that makes sense. Again, focusing mainly on biosynthetics, what would you say, Christine, are some of the challenges and barriers that you observed looking at these materials?
I think one of the challenges that we spoke about a few times is obviously the move towards second and third generation feedstocks, and how do we, in my opinion, incentivize innovators towards that. I think there's a challenge with just pushing them without incentivizing, the carrot and the stick. It needs to be a joint approach. How do we build long-term relationships where we ensure that they have the capacity to invest further and build these supply chains, right? Because that's what needs to happen. And then my second would be around the LCA process and building a more holistic data set and how we can compare. And yeah, so those are things that we discuss a lot.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anything to add from your side, Amanda?
Yeah, so echoing, actually, it's not so much, I think, pushing the innovators towards the new solutions. We need more bio-BDO, literally available. Is Novamount out there? But generally, literally, like there's a chicken and egg problem with the supply chain of the fully bio-based materials for raw materials. So yes, different generation feedstock, but just generally the actual scaled up manufacturing of the elements that go in. And I think that the thermal properties, I hear you on that one, but I think that we're finding solutions out there when you get with the right industrial scale up partner who, you know, it can be a drop-in solution into synthetic supply chains, but you do have to have smart people in the factories adjusting those temperature knobs. So it's kind of not just the knobs. I mean, but there's definitely that to me seems quite solvable with some careful planning on the factory side. So.
Camilla, any other aspects in terms of challenges and waves?
Yeah, it's working with bio-based is basically a leap of faith right now from the fashion industry because it's presenting something that we haven't seen. So seeing a fabric that is made in bio-based, out of bio-based materials is quite hard. So you're trying to sell something that doesn't really exist right now to a supply chain that's quite skeptical. And Bestseller operates in a very commercial price range, so we also need to have a leap of faith that that's possible. But I always say that within innovation, we need to look at what is solvable. And I think a lot of the problems that we face with bio-based materials are solvable, and that's something we need to focus on. So if you look at the feedstock, which is of course a huge issue, I think it's solvable. And we just saw it in the presentation before. It is solvable, and that's what we need to linger on to, that it's solvable. And then we have that production aspect. And I think, and I'm missing the suppliers here, I'm happy Lewis is here, but I'm really missing suppliers because it is possible to solve those problems if the supply chain is willing to work with us on it. And that's why fashion for good is also so important. So again, something that is solvable. And then we have the big end of life, and I know you're going to touch upon it, but that's where legislation becomes quite important because we need also to work with waste stream structures that are quite small in the beginning, but we still need to have a solution for it. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to make both a good start and a good end for the materials. But again, it's solvable. What is the biggest challenge for us is price and reaching a commercial price and how many years of investment that will require. That is one of the aspects that is most tricky for us to solve. Who makes those investments? Where does the money come from? And how do we make it less attractive to purchase fossil fuel-based materials? Because we really need to make the wrong choice less attractive than it is today. The wrong choice is too attractive, too easy to make. Polyester is too cheap, and the cost for the environment is too high. That's a problem I think we should really, really focus on solving together.
Thank you. Yeah, that sums it up. Moving on to the next section. So as you already mentioned, collaboration is really key in this space. And what do we really mean when we talk about collaboration in this space, and how can we really best collaborate and also engage suppliers? Maybe Lewis, also from the supplier perspective, we can share a few thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think traditionally it would be if you were an innovator, you'd automatically think, we need to go to the brand, we need to get the brand buy-in. But the dynamics of the supply chain and how purchases are made, generally, the brand is not nominating or dictating, like you have to use this material. It's kind of like this is the goal, get to the finish line however you get there. So it's real important to have the supplier involved because the supplier needs that buy-in. They're the one that will be managing the relationship with the innovator, say, in the long term. And also, too, what I had touched on of making sure that you understand the full manufacturing process. And it's important to have the supplier involved because different suppliers have different processes, and to know that whatever you're looking at also fits into your supply chain dynamics.
Makes sense. Christine, what would you say more from a brand perspective, how you can best work together with innovators, also engaging your supply chain?
Yeah, I think, of course, engaging our supply chain and leveraging the knowledge from each element, right? Like how can we leverage the knowledge throughout to scale at speed? I mean, polyester has been, the production has been increasing efficiency since like the 40s, right? Like, so we have to catch up, you know, and so I think it's the collaboration and knowledge sharing, which I think post-COVID is quite amazing now. Like the openness to share and collaborate across brands and suppliers is, I feel, come a long way in my perspective. So yeah, like the collaboration space, and then in these, what do we require, like alignment, so that brands are asking the same things from from the innovators. They're aligned in the data they're requiring, and we're aligned in kind of our end of life, what we want to do in terms of building end of life supply chains, as you mentioned. I think like there's so many things that we need to come together as an industry to support, because yeah, I think now we're just aware that like you've got to just think in a more holistic manner when you're considering the next generation of polymers, basically.
Definitely. Amanda, since you already work with so many different startups in this space, what would you say?
Yeah, so at Pangaya, we have a hybrid approach, which is part of the experiment of our business model, where we do investment, co-development, and co-commercialization. And this is kind of different than just us being a brand, because we were born from this idea where we were investing in startups and we were watching fashion brands they couldn't meet each other halfway to get across the finish line, and that's really where Pangaya came from. So the point being that we don't want scientists and innovators to have to start fashion brands. That's not a good use of their time. So when we can start, we can go in there, and sometimes it's cash, sometimes it's in-kind, strategic help, and then we will do development with them. So taking it off from, say, laboratory, and then we can move into our supply chain to create the textile, and we can have a full feedback loop in that space, and then we can go off and make product. Like we have everything, to be able to do product development, sales, marketing, all of that stuff, all the way through to that can just really accelerate that whole process. So the collaboration has been super key to our brand, and across all different kinds of materials, but both working with startups that are in place as well as early stage, and kind of just it's about meeting the innovator halfway to build that bridge.
Camilla, Bestseller has also collaborated with several innovators, also from the Fashion for Good network. What would you say are the best ways to work together with innovators?
Fashion for Good is, of course, a good example of how we do it. But I think what is good in Fashion for Good right now is that we are beginning to onboard more suppliers. And again, suppliers are really key in this debate, because those are the ones who actually need to produce something that we can buy. So we really need suppliers to be a part of this journey. And then find a way to channel this information like we have here today to our suppliers also in a convenient way, but they don't need to be here, because we also don't want more people to fly in. So I think there's also something in the information sharing space where we can optimize how we share relevant information with our suppliers and with our brands, so they understand the journey that we are on. And then I think industry cross collaboration is quite key, because a lot within the bio-based polyester is very linked to bio-based plastic. And we see also a lot of companies now going back to monomer stage, while we also see EU putting down legislation that can be a barrier for those companies, because one TPA can only be sold to the fashion industry because it comes from textile, another TPA can maybe only be sold to the plastic industry. That is so stupid, in my opinion. So why? Because waste is a resource. What does it matter? What is an issue here is that we need to make sure that no waste is ending up on landfills, so no waste must go into the wrong system where it can harm the environment. That's the debate we should have. The other thing is just a waste of time, in my opinion, and we don't have the time to waste anymore.
Very true, especially on the end-of-use aspect. There it's probably also interesting to consider that different materials and also different applications are suitable for different end-of-life pathways. So maybe that is also something.
Yeah, and an end-of-life pathway is not an end of life, it's the beginning of a new life. so we also need to nuance our language around what it is that we do, because we are all the consumer goods that we have are built out of something. And those building blocks today, we don't sit and debate where they come from, but why do we debate what waste stream structure they come from? So also let's focus on the real issue here.
Definitely, yeah. I remember from discussions that we also have at Fashion for Good around this topic. Christine, you also mentioned that there are different product categories that are more suitable. For example, just not really recycling them, as the consumer would not really, understand. And that some products are more suited to be compostable, for example. So that could also be an interesting.
I think when you think about different products and consumer behavior, which is a big thing, and as we consider recycling behaviors or innovate, how do they treat their products, and what do they do at the end of life? I think we're a brand that, we're a lifestyle brand that has so many different options. Like, what you do with your underwear would maybe be different. What you do with your outerwear, and your expectations of a product really vary. And I think we need to look at that consumer journey and understand how we can educate consumers, but also meet them at a reasonable behavior that they're actually going to like. I think we can talk about things in an ideal world, but we have to meet them at a real world. Like, what is going to be the life cycle of this product, and how can we optimize that? Considering, is it a recycling stream or is it a composite? Like, I think there's different options that we need to look for, and consumer behavior is, I think, an element that interests me. It's really hard to have because it's in different locations. Of course, there's such different behavior patterns, but I think it does come into play when we have these discussions.
Amanda, anything you would like to add to the topic?
Yeah, I think you're kind of edging into the conversation about biodegradability and compostability and testing and legislation, and I think it's, we just need to be all together point out, like, we do not have good systems for have standardized testing around all of these different systems, and while at the same time having infrastructure inside of cities and municipalities. And I mean, one of the things that we kind of like to talk to inside our brand is first off, it's a sort of do no harm principle. So even if something isn't certified as biodegradable, if it does end up in landfill, it will eventually biodegrade. It's all about what microbes appear and when. But the bigger point is that it's not going to leave basically harmful microplastics, right, that are in various states. So that even if your material doesn't have full biodegradable certification or compostability, if it's in each situation there is a reasonable end of life, I think we need to just start talking about it in those terms. And it's not, I think consumers think something is biodegradable or it's not, and that's not really the way that nature works. So this deeper explanation and communication around what's the sort of best fit for these various materials, knowing that we don't have an ideal solution for pickup, and they could end up anywhere. So.
Indeed. Anything you'd like to add to the end of your topic, Joost?
Yeah, I mean, it's such like a touchy topic for sure. And I think that's important as like we're innovating on biosynthetics. We need to think about, the recyclabilities, is that like the priority is making sure that it's recyclable? But beyond that, like say going back to like thermal stability, you take some of these biosynthetics that today we know them or consider them as compostable, but it's like if you're doing modifications that maybe change it so it's more applicable for textiles, does that reduce its ability to hydrolyze so easily, making it less compostable? And so it's just, I think it's a very difficult, touchy subject, and we have to be careful too, because also if we're just evaluating a fiber and we're saying like it's biodegradable or it's compostable, what's going on it, how it's processing, and then that even gets more complex when you think different suppliers are using different chemistries or different temps, and then how does that affect? So it's very complicated for sure.
For sure, definitely. Before we close out, is there any question from the audience that you would like to ask any of the panelists? Yeah, I think there's one. We can understand you from here as well, I think.
Thanks for your interesting view on your side of the market and your need for bio-based materials. I was a bit triggered, Amanda, by your question about bio-BDO, where's Novamont. I'm in the world of BDO, having a good position on the market, unfortunately still petrol-based, and there are bio-BDO projects on their way. But it's price which is relevant, and also in this, there are other steps you can make today already. Our BDO on the market has a very, very low carbon footprint for a petrol-based product. Now that Chinese product is flooding the market with low prices, whereby proven the carbon footprint is 3 to 4 times higher as our product. In fact, now our customers who really are buying our products are forced by price to start buying a third, 40% of their portfolio from Chinese product, because they cannot pass on the higher price further down the supply chain to the end customers like you, the fashion brands. Another thing is we are also in bio-based succinic acid, which can be used in TPUs. The market is like this because the bio-based succinic acid is more expensive compared to the petrol-based alternatives. So what are your ideas to make this change, to value the bio-based products, to make the price gap acceptable to the market?
Well, I think it's first of all, I think it's a combination of some brands and companies are willing to pay a higher price if it's available. So it's about the scale up and the balancing of that. So again, the chicken and egg problem. And then also, like you had mentioned, the legislation question around making the bad options, they're too attractive, right? And so that I think that it's a combination of finding the right the right purchaser who is willing to pay a premium. What we do with a lot of companies is do kind of like, it's sort of like we'll buy sort of forward. So the first section is quite expensive, but then we'll have an agreement that over 5 years it becomes cheaper, and then you kind of average that out. So an aggregation model around that is one of the things that we've been proposing. So, but it also, we have to all come together to move that up. So.
Thank you, Amanda. I think we are on time. Can we take one last question, or how does it look? One more. I think you were first in the front here.
Thank you. My name is Jan Ravenstein. Very interesting discussion, very good point. There's only one thing that I heard a lot of times, which I wish we wouldn't say anymore. End of life options. Let's change that to beginning of new life options. There are materials which has 6 different beginning of new life options, including recycling, including biodegradability, but don't overrate biodegradability. I'm biodegradable, but I'm only over glass, I guess what I'm saying, right? So
That's
talking about it is neither here nor there. So let's do that.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Beginning of life options.
Very good point.
New life options. Sorry.
Very good point to close out the discussion. Thank you very much, and I hand back to Paul.